One of the things I like about the uptake is we try not to make decisions for the people, but that said, the voters are speaking fairly clearly. And one of the exit polls from CNN shows that the voters in Florida were coalescing around the top two candidates. What is your second choice for the GOP nomination? Who might you see yourself gravitating to? And this is absolutely clear in terms of voters for McCain move to Romney, and voters for Romney move to McCain. No other candidates were able to generate significant numbers, so this suggests that Republican voters are increasingly seeing this as a two-person race.
Well, let's talk about the kids. McCain and the kids go hand in hand. MTV, McCain.
Yeah, well, the exit polls are really interesting. Is there a demographic where Romney does well relative to McCain? And there is a narrow strip of people in the 30 to 44 age group who voted for Romney over McCain. Young Republican voters, and there aren't a lot of them, but there are some, went for McCain. So there's this narrow little blip in the middle of people who voted for Romney, but that's in the 30 to 44 demographic. McCain wins everybody else.
Are there any black Republicans in Florida?
According to CNN's exit polls, there are no African American Republicans, or at least none who took the time to show up for this primary. It's really remarkable. The exit polls, tend to have percentages sprinkled all over the chart, and then when you get to African American Republicans, it just is line after line of NA, 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 NA.
You want to talk about the economy next?
One statistic that comes out of the exit polling is that if you are enthusiastic or satisfied with Bush, you tended to vote for Romney. And also, if you believe the economy is going well, you tended to vote for Romney. If you're a Republican voter and you think the economy is not going well, you broke for McCain. Clearly, Romney is associating himself with a positive perception of the United States economy. How well that plays out in the general is an interesting question. Churchgoers who go more than weekly, that's very committed churchgoers. Yeah, that would be Stacker, and voted for Huckabee, and that's the only place where he showed any strength. And there's an interesting stratification which corresponds to how much candidates tended to speak about religion. That seems to translate directly into their performance in at least the Florida primary. Weekly churchgoers voted for Romney, and the people who don't go to church that much, maybe a few times a year, voted for McCain. So the candidates' public expression of their religiosity seems to be finding direct expression among the Florida electorate.
So over to the beauty contests.
Yeah, I feel like I have to say this over and over again. There was a pledge not to campaign in Florida because of when Florida decided to hold its election. And we're going to see an ongoing debate as to whether these people the delegates from Florida should be seated or not. The Democratic Party in particular doesn't want to be seen as disenfranchising voters. And yet, somebody needs to get a handle on this primary process, which is broken and out of control. And one of the few ways to exercise any control over that is to penalize people for getting into the game of leapfrog as to when the primaries are going to start. But I think the real problem is now the Clinton campaign, actively sensing that they were going to do well, is attempting to change the rules after the fact. And there was a collective agreement to sign the pledge on the one hand and then argue, but now that it looks like I'm going to win, the delegates should be seated, is not the kind of campaign that I was hoping for.
And this is such a close race that seating those delegates in Florida could flip it for Clinton.
Do we want this election to be decided on a debate over whether to seat delegates or not, when all of the candidates pledged that they weren't going to campaign there? I mean, to be arguing now that the results, from the point where the results became apparent from the polling, that we need to change that's I'm disappointed in that argument. That would be an understated.
This is the most worked up I've ever seen Professor John Logie. Well, let's move on to some of the metrics there in exit polling.
Yeah, we saw this in South Carolina as well. South Carolina had an overwhelming bias towards female voters, 61%. And as we saw there, Obama did well. Here in Florida, the numbers are very close. It's 59% female to 41% male, but the voters are breaking for Clinton. So we're not seeing a lockstep movement in terms of it, an expression of identity politics playing out precisely, and that's, I think, a very positive thing. The numbers so far suggest that you don't necessarily vote for the candidate who most superficially resembles you, and since we're in the 21st century, that's a hopeful sign.
How did African American voters break down on the Dem side?
Well,
more than zero.
Yes, there were plenty of African American voters on the Democratic side. 73% went for Barack Obama. The surprise for me is that John Edwards' populist message does not seem to be playing at all well with African American voters. He got 1% relative to Clinton's 25%. I wonder what it is about John Edwards and his message that is not connecting more broadly with that demographic. But we've been surprised by his poor performance in the past. I mean, that he was only able to pull 4% overall, and admittedly in the caucus system in Nevada, this number is kind of startling, and it would have to be disheartening. His campaign clearly has to do better outreach to African American voters if it's going to be successful.
Look at the Kennedy endorsement. What effect did that have? We had a little entourage of Kennedys throwing their weight behind Barack Obama, and how did that play?
Well, the surprise here is that of that group who said that the Kennedy endorsement was important to them, 30% voted for Clinton. You would expect people who ascribed importance to the Kennedy endorsement to break overwhelmingly for Obama. After all, Kennedy did endorse Obama. But that 30% of the voters in Florida said, yes, it's important that Kennedy endorsed Obama, and I'm going to go over and vote for Clinton, shows that the Kennedy endorsement is not necessarily a 100% positive for Obama.
Among voters who decided in the last 3 days, is that more significant?
The point here is that Clinton and Obama are splitting the people who can't decide until we get very close to the election. In those last-minute decisions, you might have expected a bigger bump given the Obama campaign success and sort of dominating the news. But those people still broke almost 50-50 between those two candidates.
So still very much a four-person race split between the Democrats and the Republicans. Have any closing thoughts, or just thoughts moving ahead to Super Tuesday?
Well, here at the Uptake, a center of citizen journalism, I'd like to say 5. The voters have pretty clearly coalesced around Romney and McCain, and we can reflect what they say. On the Democratic side, Edwards is still creeping along and picking up delegates, and the whole point of this, as far as I'm concerned, is reminding people you do get to decide. Until you don't, until the super delegates swoop it on the Democratic side and make sure that we don't inadvertently nominate someone like George McGovern.
Stay tuned here on Super Tuesday, February 5th, because we will have a crazy live show with coverage from all kinds of states, at least half of the states participating in caucuses and primaries.
And Chuck's going on the road.
I'm going on the road. I'm going on a little road trip. The Uptake Southern Fried Tour 2008.
I'm sorry, Stacker's going on the road.
Stacker will be in the trunk with duct tape on his mouth. But I'm going down south, St. Louis, Tennessee, Georgia, Alabama, Arkansas, and Oklahoma, assuming I make it that far. Your donations will help me make it that far. Donate now. And thanks, John, and we'll see you back here on Super Tuesday.